Inspirational Creatives, episode 267.
We met for a coffee. It was supposed to only be a half an hour coffee. Ended up being about a 4-hour meeting. I guess the two synergies were just perfect. You know, Kath's an incredibly creative person. Us together as founders accelerate the business as much as possible.
Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here, and a very warm welcome to this festive edition of Inspirational Creatives. It's not really going to be that festive. My guest today is somebody who created his first business at the age of 15 and is now a CEO at the age of 22. The business was called Breeze, a clothing brand, and although only small, it was plenty inspiring for the founder to go on to create an industry-leading business called Influencer, in marketing's hottest segment today. Partnering up with YouTube sensation Casper Lee as a co-founder, in 2017 he was labelled as one of the young entrepreneurs to watch by both Alphr and startups.co.uk. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you from London today, Ben Jeffries. Ben, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be on your show. So I really appreciate that. Or your podcast, should I say.
Great to have you here. So before we get stuck in, how would you describe who you are and what it is that you do in the world today?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of who we are at Influencer, we connect brands with influential content creators on social media. So we basically help brands get, a large social media presence so they're able to, directly speak to their consumers on social media, because we all know that social media is where everything is going. That's essentially what Influencer does. Myself launched the company, I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit more details, but launched the company quite a few years back, and the company's just sort of grown from strength to strength, taking on board new exciting people, more exciting sort of campaigns we've been working on, and obviously really, really exciting clients and creators as well.
So what's it like to be a CEO at 22?
For me, not to sort of say anything like second nature or anything like that, but I've kind of only really been in that role. So I haven't really had to adapt as such, but it's actually quite funny. I'm actually the second youngest in our team. So from that sort of token as such, I absolutely love the role. I love the team around us. There's around 25 of us in the Influencer team. And, it's all such like a close sort of knit family that we get on so well. It doesn't really feel like necessarily that there is that much of a hierarchy.
And who's the youngest?
It's actually an intern. Yeah. Who's fantastic, but no, she's doing a wonderful job. And she's 2 years younger than me.
Amazing.
So I'm 22 and she's 20.
Yeah, I mean, I guess most people's expectation of a CEO is somebody who's got a lot of business experience. And as you say, you've kind of almost grown up with or walked into this role. What are some of the challenges that you find in your professional and in your personal life now, being a CEO of a company of 25 people at your age?
Yeah, of course. I mean, going down the route of a CEO always necessarily having experience, I think it's important to, address like relevant experience as such, because if we think about influencer marketing as an industry, sure, I've only been working in the industry for 4 or 5 years now, but influencer marketing has only been around for that long too. So in essence, if you're going to say, okay, well, who's someone who's experienced within the influencer marketing industry, myself would fall under that category. In terms of, how it affects me in both a work and a personal standpoint, addressing work first and foremost, I have actually had situations, especially when I was younger, or like a couple of years back, where I have had meetings where people have been almost disregard me because of my age. And obviously that's quite a bit of a tough bullet to sort of bite, but you just have to, look past them and almost think about, they've missed the opportunity, and almost use that as a inspiration or a stepping stone to further drive everything within your business so that you can prove those guys wrong. On the flip side, also in terms of work, it helps me understand the industry much more, being young within the industry, because often influencer marketing as such is around the Gen Z or millennial sort of generation. So having been within that sort of age bracket, I'm able to actually understand the consumers a lot more. So for brands, that's much more relevant. In terms of personal life, I never really switch off ever. Working very, very long hours, it definitely affects me, especially when I dropped out of university. Obviously, at 20 years old, I dropped out of university. That's obviously quite an odd thing to sort of do and just focus purely on work. It wasn't like I dropped out to perhaps, take a year to decide what I wanted to do. I dropped out. I went full steam into working incredibly long hours of business. So that definitely has its own personal effect, should we say.
Yeah. So in many respects, you're actually quite well qualified for the job because you've grown up with the generation that benefits from what it is that you do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from that token, qualified for being within, an influencer marketing CEO, yes. Being a CEO of an insurance company, absolutely not. And I can definitely, I'm definitely open to admit that. I'm not trying to sit here sort of saying that I can be the CEO of any company in the world. It's very much dependent on, I guess, both what the industry is, but also the team you have around you. And influencer marketing, being quite a young industry, also has its benefits for me in my own personal role.
Yeah. So what are some of the roles and responsibilities that you have then? I guess no 2 days are the same, but what are some of the themes and the key tasks that you find yourself dealing with on a day-to-day basis?
Obviously, the company is split into sort of different departments. So we have, I guess, 4 different departments within the company. So we have the technology department. I'm obviously having regular meetings with our CTO around what's going on with both the product and the tech. Then we have our marketing team. So I'm having regular meetings with our marketing team about which sort of direction we're moving. Then I have obviously meetings with our sales team. So that's led by our head of sales. I'm having regular meetings. Okay, well, what's going on with the sales? Who are we going after? What's in the pipeline? And then obviously with lastly, the campaigns team to see how existing campaigns we're running are actually working. And then it's not just having individual meetings with all, but it's also ensuring that all of their goals are aligned, because obviously they're going to have their own individual goals being in a segment group, but we need to ensure that all of them are aligned so that the company as a whole can be pushed forward collectively. So that's what a lot of my time's taken up to doing. But also from the same token of it is going out, seeing clients, both from a agency perspective, brand perspective, creative perspective, but then also on the flip side, the way companies often grow are through partnerships. So it's for me to be going out and thinking, okay, well, what are sort of right companies for us to be in partnership with to help drive our growth while also, I guess, driving their growth too.
Yeah. And I guess for our listener, they may not be aware of exactly what it is that you do, whereas I am, and I'm sort of taking that for granted. So could you describe for our listener how Influencer works in terms of how you help brands with their social media?
Yeah, of course. So I think even going a step further back, I guess assessing what an influencer is, because an influencer can mean all different sort of things. I think in the sense that we're talking about an influencer being someone who is influential on social media. And that can be further broken down into, I guess, types of different influencers. So I would break influencers down into 4 different subcategories. So someone called a nano influencer is someone who has between 1,000 followers and 10,000 followers. And they've got obviously influence over their followers there. And then someone who's a micro influencer, which is quite topical right now, is someone with between 10,000 followers and 100,000 followers. And then someone with between 100,000 and 1 million followers is called a macro influencer. And then someone with over 1 million is called a hero influencer. And the reason why I'm breaking them down into those 4 segments is because each of the different segments has its own benefits and weaknesses. So the macro influencers are the bigger hitters, with the hero influencers, and they help for brands deliver that brand awareness factor and that name association factor. Where these nano influencers and these micro influencers, they've built their large following, not necessarily because people actually know them by name. So they don't really have any name association value, but what they do have is a really engaged community, because someone with, say, 30,000 followers is someone who's got an engaged following around what they're posting about. People are following them for their content that they create. So it tends to be that micro influencers and nano influencers are more called influential content creators because they're influential for the content that they create. And that's why I thought it was just important to address that. Now, in terms of, I guess, going into what influencer marketing is, it's when a brand is using these influencers to basically talk about their product or service on social media. So where we come in is we help facilitate the connection between the brands and these influencers. And we ourselves, we have our own self-service technology where brands can basically go onto our platform and they can search for creators through our creator discovery tool. They can then speak directly with our creators and establish relationships with them. They can use it as a campaign management tool because they can send offers to creators. The creators can submit draft content through the platform. And then it's also a campaign reporting tool because afterwards we pull in all the analytics of the campaigns all into one centralized place. So that's a complete like self-service element of the tool. Of course, we have a managed service as well, where we would run it for brands on their behalf, where we will basically choose the influencers and work with the creators on the content to produce the results for our clients.
I mean, you must get some pretty amazing results with some of the work that you do.
Absolutely. So we work with the likes of, in terms of brand direct, we work with the likes of Nokia, Pretty Little Thing, McDonald's. And these are all fantastic clients who we've worked with for quite a long time. We are producing some great results for them. On the flip side, in terms of agencies, we work with all of the top agency groups. So we work with the likes of WPP, Omnicom, Dentsu, Publicis, work with all of them. And, we are producing some fantastic results. It's really exciting to be a part of some of their clients' campaigns as well.
You've grown up in a world where the internet's always been around.
Yeah.
Having a vast understanding and an awareness of social media, at what point did you get the idea for Influencer? When did the inspiration strike for the brand as such?
Of course. So as you mentioned, I had a clothing brand when I was younger. That was the first sort of taste of business when I was around 15. When I had this clothing brand, I always had the perception, as Mark Zuckerberg actually said, is that ads aren't cool. No one really likes ads. They can be intrusive and they're essentially just people selling you stuff. And I always thought, okay, well, what is a cool marketing technique as such? And that was if celebrities wear your clothes, because if a celebrity's wearing your clothes, it seems like the next big thing almost. I mean, the greatest issue I had was, this is when I was actually 16, so a year on from launching the business. I was like, well, I can't afford any celebrities to wear my clothes, nor do I have any connections with any celebrities who can wear my clothes. But I thought, okay, well, I'm a massive Chelsea Football Club fan. I thought, why don't I reach out to some reserve team players at Chelsea who have around like 10,000 followers on Twitter at the time? And I thought, if I can get these guys to basically wear my clothes and basically post tweets about them, then those that do follow them are going to be quite engaged with their audience and will actually be much more likely to react to it. And I was getting a really, really good response with these, reserve team players. So I didn't just focus on Chelsea reserve team players. I also focused on other football club reserve team players. And then I moved into not just sporting guys. I also moved into models, fitness bloggers, food bloggers. And it started opening up and up. And I started building this really big, network of connections among these influential people on social media. So I thought, okay, well, there's going to be value in providing this network of connections to other brands as well, if I'm getting such a good return of investment when using them. Obviously, had a quick look in the market to see if anyone else was really doing it. Spoke to PR agencies. They would just charge crazy retainers. And there was no one really out there who even knew much about this. I thought, okay, it's the perfect opportunity to, penetrate the market and do this. Essentially, that was, the brainchild or the brainwave as such to actually thinking into this.
And how did you find your way in? You mentioned working with the reserve teams there. Was that a strategic step in that sense?
Yeah, 100%. It was just sort of tweeting them saying, hey guys, do you want some free clothes? And would you mind posting a tweet about it? And I'll give you 50 quid. and then they would respond. And then naturally, as you get to speak to more and more of these sort of people, they introduce you to their friends. And then it's just sort of a chain reaction as such.
And it evolved from there in that sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me the story about Casper Lee. I mean, I appreciate some of our listeners may not know who he is. So maybe a short description of Casper and what he's about would be great. But tell me about your relationship there and how you've evolved as friends and as founders of Influencer in that sense.
Yeah, of course. So Casper himself, I mean, he's an incredible guy. And in terms of what he's managed to achieve, he's one of the first, influencers to be within the millions of followers from when he actually back started. He's been awarded, multiple awards around that. So, he won global social media superstar last year by global.com, which is an incredible achievement. And for everything he has done. So he's got around 18 million combined followers across the likes of Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. So he's a very influential person as such. And I'm sure if any of the listeners actually asked their kids if they knew who Casper Lee was, I'm sure the kids would be like, oh my God, Casper Lee. So very much within that sort of group. In terms of how Casper and I actually met, so it was actually a couple of years ago. So at this time, actually, Casper's face was all around London because he was on the adverts for YouTube. So YouTube had him as like their, I guess, like poster boy, all on the London Tube adverts and everything. And he actually, I mean, it's a bit like a Tinder success story, I guess you could say, because he actually matched with one of my friends on Tinder and ended up going out. And I was like to her, the girl that he matched with, Maddie, I was like, Maddie, you've got to introduce me to Casper. You know, I'm starting to plan, or I've launched a company called Influencer, and I need someone like Casper on board. And it would be the perfect sort of person to join this. And she was like, look, I'll sit up with a coffee with Casper, no promises, and then just see what happens. So we met for a coffee. It was supposed to only be a half an hour coffee, ended up being about a 4-hour meeting. I guess the two synergies were just perfect. You know, Casper's an incredibly creative person. Us together as founders helped, I guess, accelerate the business as much as possible.
That's a great story. Knowing him as you do, and I appreciate there's going to be many things, but what would you say the secret to his success is? You know, is there an underlying principle? Is there something that he does that you think that is a trait that you see in all the successful people that you know?
I'd say with Casper, he's definitely persistent, and by persistent, I mean he never lets his head drop. If he's got a goal, Casper will end up achieving his goal. And I think that's seen from the testimony that it took around him 3 years to even gain his first 1,000 subscribers, and he just consistently put out content because he enjoyed doing it. Casper's someone who he never got into becoming a social media influencer as such because he was motivated by the monetary aspects about it. He enjoys creating the content, and the monetary aspects have just followed. And that's really, really important because that's enabled him to create a really authentic brand. Naturally, that's seen by people, you know, the fan base he's been able to actually build up.
I love that. So it's about authenticity in the sense that he creates content for creating content's sake in that sense. And also it's about persistence. He just puts his head down and he just does what he aims to do. It's about taking action, I guess, in that sense, consistently.
Exactly. And, you know, if Casper tells me we're going to achieve this, I will firmly believe we will achieve that, because together we'll think of a plan where we can make it work and we will not stop until we get to that plan, which I love about that.
Yeah. It must be a great asset to the business. I mean, how have things evolved since his involvement?
Massively. I mean, him coming into the business, I would say that when Casper joined, like, it kind of relaunched the business. In essence, it sort of grew the business up. Because before Casper became involved, there was only, you know, a few of us within the business. And then ever since Casper's come on board, we've accelerated, you know, now it's 25 people. He gets us into a lot of meetings. He gets pretty much any creator we want onto the platform. And he's just a great asset to have. And also because of his creative mindset, you know, we could be sitting down in the office working on briefs and Casper's there thinking, okay, well, this is the creative direction that we need to be having for the brands that we're working with. And then we'll send it over to brands and they'll literally, you know, almost fall off their chairs, loving it.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me what you mean by word of mouth redefined. I know this is a term that you use within the influencer brand. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, of course. It's actually a trademark phrase of ours. So I trademarked it quite a few years ago. And the whole concept was that you were thinking, okay, well, word of mouth, you know, this is, you know, a peer-to-peer recommendation. And essentially, if we're thinking about what you're doing on social media, is you're speaking to peers as such, right? You're speaking to peers about something. So the whole concept of word of mouth redefined was essentially that we'd redefined word of mouth in the way that you were not just speaking about stuff to people in person, but you're now speaking about stuff to people through social media. So it's the redefinition, I guess, of word of mouth marketing, just how you're interacting with people.
Yeah, with that in mind, I mean, I see a lot of people struggling with social media, perhaps people not of your generation in that sense, but it's a fact of life. It's there, it exists, it has tremendous power. And I think in some respects, as a human race, we're all still trying to get to grips with it in terms of what it means to us as a tool for connectivity. What do you see some of the biggest mistakes people making when they're trying to use social media and trying to develop and engage an audience around their creative work today?
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting because in terms of, I guess, the mistakes that people make on social media, are we talking more brand mistakes or are we talking more creator mistakes? We're talking about, like, you know, creators wanting to build followings or brands wanting to build followings.
Yeah, I guess where I'm coming from is when I talk to people and where I hear they're struggling, I think sometimes there's a fear of using it by being too clumsy, perhaps, and not using it in the right way. And I think people are still trying to get to grips with the effective ways to use it and the sort of etiquette around it. And I was just wondering if you saw any big obvious mistakes that people make, and also what are perhaps some of the best practices in your opinion. You know, how do you see people using it really effectively from your point of view?
Yeah, of course. I think the first and foremost thing is that some people don't take social media seriously.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest things because, you know, especially with, let's just say, not just the millennials and the Gen Z, often older people sort of perhaps don't think it's something, they just think it's sort of a fad, which is not going to perhaps last. The thing is, you could go out for dinner and you could judge people for being on their phones throughout the whole meal, or you could judge, you know, your kids for not having good communication skills because all they're doing is being on their phone. But the thing is, you know, our phones are one of the most important things to us. They're like our remote controls to our society. They're basically, you know, and social media within this. It's our tools to communicate to people. So it's not just the fact that people are communicating through other means. Like, this is where the future is lying. And if we look at where things like virtual reality are going as well, this is the way, especially with Facebook Home, this is the direction that it's actually going. And so it's about taking social media as such more seriously. And then on top of that, it's about, because you're taking it seriously, it's so important to be authentic, because people think, okay, I need to create a different persona on social media. I need to be someone different. No, essentially, be authentic, be true to yourself. And that is the most important thing, because otherwise you'll feel too much pressure for being on social media. You'll feel like you'll have to be someone that you're not. And then perhaps that is where it can become stressful being on social media. But if you're just true and you're authentic, then that is how you can organically as well build an audience, because people will buy into you for who you actually are. So I'd say it's the first bit is taking it seriously. The second bit is being authentic. And I'd say that those are the two main sort of pointers around it.
Yeah, I like what you said there. It reminds me of this principle I once heard by a brand strategist friend of mine, Phil Pallen, who talked about recreating the offline experience online. So that's, I guess you're talking about the same thing in that sense.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, from your point of view, do you think there's also a bit of a dark side to all of this as well? Because I was chatting to the founder of a telecoms company last week, and he was saying about one of the big challenges at the moment with data and technology and social media is addiction. I was wondering if you saw anything like that, or, you know, what's your perspective on that?
I think it's something which kind of relates back to, I guess, that exact point that we were just making in the last question about there is the danger. But I think it's like with everything, it's using it in the right proportion.
Yeah.
I think it's only frowned upon as such that, you know, kids are spending all their times on their phone, because it's not what people are used to, you know, necessarily doing. But it's not necessarily a bad thing if it enables them to be able to communicate to at least other people and not having to, I guess, not talk to anyone as such. So, I mean, it definitely has its negatives, but I think it's depending on how you see those negatives and whether you could actually see them as opportunities. Otherwise, we actually have partnered up with a charity called Young Minds. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Young Minds.
I've heard of the name, yeah.
It's a charity supporting young people in mental health. And one of the key messages to sort of say is that social media helps people actually be able to have a voice where perhaps they didn't previously had a voice. So I think as long as you can see it as an opportunity and there are the right supports, I guess, if things are incorrect, then that's absolutely fine in the essence of using it.
Yeah, got it. So that sounds great. Tell me a little bit more about your interaction with Young Minds. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, of course. So we held an event a couple of weeks ago, or actually about a month ago now. God, time really does fly fast. But what we did is we got a couple of influencers actually on a panel, as well as our head of sales, but also someone from Young Minds, to basically just talk about the effects of social media on mental health. And it was great to hear, you know, people open up about stories, people ask about questions, and the effects of things like Facetune, which is a photo editing app. And it was just an opportunity for, I guess, to get more clarity on situations. But also, I think it was, you know, moreover about the message that if you are feeling anxious or anything like that from being too much on social media, there are experts such as those people from Young Minds who are there for you to talk to as your support group.
That's fantastic. I'll make sure I put a link to those guys in the show notes so folks can learn more about that.
Perfect.
There. Whilst we're on that side of things then, tell me about what you mean about influencer fraud. This is a new term for me, but I understand it's becoming quite a big problem in your industry at the moment.
Yes, I mean, influencer fraud is something about, I guess, people seeing on social media how much money perhaps these influencers are gaining and what sort of popularity they're gaining around it. And people being encouraged to buy followers, buy likes, to almost become influencers through fraudulent activity. And it is becoming a problem because the reason it's becoming a problem is becoming much harder to detect as such. So, previously it'd be quite easy to detect because you could see someone who's bought followers by the fact that they would have 100,000 followers and you'd expect them to have around 3,000 likes, but they'd only have about 30 likes. So that's like the obvious detection. But what people have started doing is they've started not just buying followers, but also buying likes. So, their engagement rates are then matching up. Fortunately, we've, for example, in-house influencer.com, we've actually developed our own AI tool where we can look into things further, where we can see, okay, well, these are the audience demographics of your followers. We can see a large proportion, despite you being a UK-based influencer, are actually based out in Brazil, for example. So we can see that you've fraudulently got stuff from there. But we've also can detect based on who the followers actually are. So we can detect, okay, well, how many of your followers have, say, no content actually on their profiles, or who follow the maximum number of people, or who just don't have anything in their description. So we can help to pick up fraudulent followers that way. We can also help to pick up fraudulent likes because we can see, okay, well, this person has no correlation to your actual account. So why on earth would they have liked your photo? Because there is no reason for them to have even found your photo because you have no mutuals. So there are different ways which we can help to pick up aspects of influencer fraud. But even more exciting is on a Monday evening, Instagram actually announced that they would be culling a lot of fake followers and fake bots. So there's a big announcement from Instagram about that, which is fantastic for the industry because it can help stamp out this whole fraud element.
Yeah, I read something recently that Facebook have done something similar. Is that right?
Yeah, so obviously Facebook own Instagram, so I think it's been like a joint effort, but Facebook have done it recently as well on terms of Facebook pages, but Twitter have done it recently. I think the biggest thing for social networks as well, what we have to take into consideration, because people are always, trying to say that they should have taken action much sooner. There is, I guess, two different adverse effects from it. One is that it's a very, very hard task to do because the reason these guys are being able to create these fake accounts, these fake followers, is because they're following the natural human pattern and they're getting a bot as such to just follow that natural human pattern. So it's becoming much harder for the social networks to automatically detect. So they have to invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions, into ways to actually combat it. The second thing you also have to consider is if they're reporting to their earnings, let's say that they are having 300 million users and then they suddenly have to cull 50, it's not the best sort of thing for their investors to see, hold on, you told me you had 300 million, you've just culled 50 million for being fake followers. So you actually don't have 300 million users, you only have 250 million users. So it's something which I guess you have to seriously consider whether the social networks would want to do it.
It sounds like tricky business because technology is always advancing. And I guess you've got to always, and the social media networks have to try and stay ahead of the game.
Absolutely. Technology is always advancing, it's becoming more difficult to track. But then that's why, even however good our own fraud tools are at influencer.com, no one's going to be able to do the tool better than Instagram themselves because they've got that much more data on these profiles who are created through their accounts. So it's up to really them to continually stamp it out as they are trying to do so, in my own opinion.
So we've looked a little bit at the dark side of things. Let's go back to the brighter side of things in terms of your world, where influencer is at the moment. What's some of the exciting things that's going on in your space at the moment?
So I think some of the exciting things are obviously it's the lead up to Christmas, and obviously even before that is Black Friday. So there are some really exciting campaigns that we're working on. And actually, more recently, we just did quite a big one around, I don't know if you've heard of a day called Singles Day.
I've heard of it.
So it's quite a big day in Asia, essentially, where it's for those people who are single, they essentially spend as much money on themselves as possible to basically make themselves feel better, right? And we helped one of our clients, who's actually Alibaba, essentially bring this whole Singles Day concept to the UK and actually Europe. It was more of a European campaign. So that was quite an exciting campaign that we worked on. So it's seeing influencers, I guess, being used in more, I guess, mainstream marketing events, which is fantastic. I guess also, which is nice to see within the industry, is the aspect of longer term partnerships as well, because we all know that, you know, when you work with any sort of long term marketing partner as such, that helps build up a relationship aspect, but also it shows to, you know, followers alike that it's more about a deeper relationships, which helps build retention around authenticity. Because again, if someone's promoting something on a regular basis, then it provides that authenticity because it shows they're actually using it. And therefore, on the flip side, the follower is going to be much more likely to action on it. So it helps build the retention and them keeping using it as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that. I guess with that in mind, what's been the most exciting campaign you've worked on so far?
Probably it's one we're actually working on at the moment with Pretty Little Thing. So we're running their YouTube influencer strategy. What we're doing with them is we're getting different influencers to be posting about, you know, style hauls, which is essentially them like unboxing different sort of gifts from Pretty Little Thing, which is really, really exciting. But the part which I actually like the best about it is when you think about male influencers, right? You'll actually find that their audience split, dependent on the content that they create, if they're entertainers, it tends to be actually much more female dominated. So someone who's a male influencer might have, let's say, a 60% female to 40% male split, whereas a female influencer might have the opposite, or if not higher. So they might have 70% male and 30% female.
Interesting.
So what we've actually done a little bit differently is with them is we've been using more male influencers to promote a female brand. What that's done is it's these male influencers promoting about what they're doing with their girlfriends. So in turn, their followers who are girls are saying, oh my God, this is what this influencer's girlfriend's getting. This is what I need to get as well. So it's just a different way of, again, using data within the industry to, I guess, produce more effective results for your clients' target demographics.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What surprised you? Because obviously you get some insights and data with the work that you do. What have been some of the biggest surprises for you during your time at Influencer so far in terms of what the analytics have revealed?
I guess first and foremost, going back to influencer fraud, I guess you could say one of the most intriguing things is how you perhaps think an influencer might look as incredibly authentic on the face of things. Then you look into their data and you're like, wow, I'm surprised you fooled everyone.
Yeah.
But I think even on the flip side, in terms of like campaign analytics, I think one of the most important things is to think, okay, well, just because someone has a massive following, let's say they got millions of followers, doesn't necessarily mean that their account is actually making any impact with their followers. So someone with, say, 3 million followers might not have really any influence over their following. They might have just gone on perhaps a reality TV show. So people are following them to actually just find out about more gossip as such. So when they promote an ad, they don't really respond to it. But then you might find someone with, say, 50,000 followers who has a really, really engaged, concentrated audience. They're responding to their followers the whole time. So the audience or their followers as such are much more impactful, I guess, on whatever the influencer posts. And therefore that someone with 50,000 followers can actually produce better, sales necessarily than someone with 3 million followers, which is quite incredible, really. It's about knowing the influencers and the data behind them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, actually, you must have to do quite a bit of matchmaking yourselves in terms of the brands you're working with and the influencers that work with them.
Absolutely, and that's where our platform comes in so perfectly. It's not to sort of promote it too much, but that's the whole point of the platform. It helps to create that sort of brand match score for those influencers. A lot of these smaller guys who might be really impactful, the brands will not know by name. So it's really important that the brands can search by the data behind them to be able to access these influencers. Because, you as a brand might not necessarily want to search on where their audience is from, but you might want to search by audience age, or you might want to search by audience interests, or even the creator brand affinity. So, there's quite a few different ways, but it's really, really, I guess, exciting to see the amount of data that's involved within it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate there's some brand leaders and business leaders listening to this podcast right now, and they might be interested in what are the typical steps that you would then go through then. So a brand might approach you, you've got access to influencers. What's the next step? How do you take them through that process?
So obviously, once we've connected the influencers, the actual first and foremost thing is I haven't actually really explained too much necessarily about the influencers we have on our platform. So The influencers we have on our platform, we're an incredibly vetted network. So we are backed, obviously, by quite a few of the world's most popular creatives. So not just Casper, but we have other sort of investors like Josh Peters, Joe Sugg. So, we are very much backed by creators. And so every single influencer who applies for our network, we check for things like fake followers, fake engagement, content creation ability, but also whether we feel that they're the right fit for the brands we work with. Because we don't just want them on our platform if we're not going to be able to get them any work as such. So for us, we are the most vetted, but then I guess the way we see it is we have the best of the best influencers on our platform. And I think someone quoted us as the SOHO house of influencer platforms, which is quite interesting, but it gives a perception of who we are as such. So once they're on the platform, it then makes it easier to, I guess, match-make them with the brands. Once they're obviously match-made, once they've agreed, I guess, campaign deliverables with the actual brands, it's then about creating the content for them. And we're always here to help support the creators as well. And that's where Casper, again, is a massive asset for us, because he loves the whole aspect of creator mentoring. He loves supporting other creators to essentially help them grow their channel and how to teach them how to correctly work with brands as well. So once they've actually matched with the brand, it then goes to do the actual creative content side of things. And then after that, it's then actually about getting the campaign live.
Fascinating. That's really fascinating. So I'll ask you shortly about where people can find out more about your work. But what would you say is the proudest achievement so far with Influencer?
I think the proudest achievement is we actually won an award, which is about a month ago. So although it was in theory a personal award, it was the Media Week campaign's Rising Star Award. It was more like a team award because it was something to show the team, that we've managed collectively to actually be recognized by someone such as Media Week for actually making an impact within the industry. Because any work that I necessarily do, it's all about the people behind me, and it's not just about me. I can only take the company to a certain level. It's actually the guys in the office who are totally killing it, really. It was a nice reward, I guess, to see that our hard work is actually doing stuff together.
It's a lovely piece of recognition in that sense.
Exactly.
So talking about the guys in the office, how do you select? I mean, obviously you're responsible for the people within your organisation of 25. What do you look for in somebody to work with you at Influencer?
We like people who, it's going to sound a bit odd, but who will bring good vibes to the office, right? It's so important that people who we bring on board get on well with everyone in the office. I think that's the most important thing. We're all a team of creatives, I would say. So everyone within the team is a very creative mindset, whether they work in sales, whether they work in tech, whether they work in the campaign team. It's all creative, because I think that's where the industry is sort of lying as well, or heading towards, should I say. So it's really creatives, good vibes. And then it's really obviously, why do they want to work with us? What makes them really attractive to our proposition? And then I guess, are they aligned to our end goal with that in mind, which is for us to become the world's largest influencer company, but also on a vetted scale.
Great stuff. I mean, you've been very successful already in your life. For anyone listening to this who might be thinking of starting their own business, what advice would you give to them, knowing what you have learned already through your journey so far?
I would say it's, I guess the biggest sort of advice is that along your own journey, you will face a lot of, I guess, upsets or perhaps items which you could see as failures, but I would never, ever see them as failures. I would always see them as stepping stones to further success. And it's that continued motivation that you have within yourself, which will help you, I guess, overcome those issues and will actually make you better for them. No one else wants to see anyone else fail. So reach out to other people, reach out to people who you know can support you. And I think from that same token, you'll be surprised by how many people are wanting to help. People will offer, free marketing advice, free sales advice. And it's about just using those opportunities to motivate yourself and just never giving up, essentially.
Yeah, great. So again, it's about persistence.
Persistence is always key.
What's inspired you recently?
What's inspired me recently? It's a very, very good question. England getting to the semi-finals of the World Cup. No, I mean, all jokes apart, that was the aspects as to why that was actually quite inspiring is because it actually was incredible. Like anywhere you'd go, whether you went to a pub or whether you went to a bar in England, it's incredible to see so many people united by something. And it was all that everyone was driving for the collective goal of England winning the World Cup. And although it was quite funny to consistently say it's coming home and all the rest of it, it was nice to see that people who perhaps weren't interested in sport all suddenly became collectively interested in it because it was, the going thing there. And I think that was really, really inspiring from a non-business element, should I say. I guess from my own personal aspirations in a business element, someone called Gary Vaynerchuk, I personally find very inspiring. He produces great daily content. I'm literally amazed by how much content that he can personally produce. But, he produces so much content and inspiring stuff, which can help you, I guess, motivate yourself consistently by listening and watching to it.
Yeah, and I know there's some Gary Vee fans listening to this right now, so I'm sure they can relate with that too. What are you grateful for today?
Grateful for families and friends' support, always. I think that's one of the most important things, especially when you are working incredibly long hours. And I think this relates to a question you, I guess, asked right at the start about being a CEO so young. Your social life definitely takes a hit. And you probably will become one of the most moody people in times when you perhaps shouldn't be. So it's grateful for family and friends to perhaps support you and don't necessarily, I guess, move away from you because of that. They can understand from it, and from the same token, they're consistently there to support you and always offer you support.
Would you say it's your family and friends that help you to keep your feet on the ground and your head together?
Absolutely. And to not get ahead of yourself at all either.
Yeah, and that must be quite a challenge because of the field of work that you work in.
Yeah, it's always there. I think if you ever got ahead of yourselves as such, that's when things can just come tumbling down as quickly as possible. So I think it's always important to stay level-headed and just keep going towards that goal which you've set at the start and not let distractions get in the way of things.
So what's next for Influencer? What's next for you and what's next for Influencer?
I mean, we've grown massively. This time last year, there was actually around 3 of us in the office. We're now 25. We're actually just going into our Series A at the moment. So the company's growing further. I mean, we're going for our Series A, not necessarily now because we need it, but because we've just decided that we want to scale up even faster. Not that obviously we're not going at a fast rate already. But we thought, okay, well, it's now time to sort of tackle new markets. Influencer marketing budgets in the States are 4 times as large. So it's for us essentially to continue where we're going and just to grow further.
Yeah, amazing. And where can folks find out more about you and Influencer, of course?
So they can find more about us at just influencer.com, nice and easy. Or they can find more about either myself on LinkedIn, or feel free to ever drop me a message via email on ben@influencer.com, or just via Instagram. Our handle is influencer and my own personal handle is Ben W. Jeffries. So feel free to drop me a message.
That's awesome, Ben. Well, thank you so much for such an inspiring chat today.
No, thank you so much, Rob, for having me on your show.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there. This episode of Inspirational Creatives is hosted on the podcast platform Libsyn. If you're thinking of starting your own podcast and if you're looking for a podcast host, Libsyn is the podcast hosting platform that the Inspirational Creatives podcast has been reliably hosted on since launching in November 2014. If you'd like to give it a try, I'm pleased to share with you the promo code CREATIVE, which you can use on libsyn.com. That promo code is good for up to 2 months free trial. If you use the code at the beginning of a month, then you'll receive all of that month and the next month free. However, if you use the promo code later in the month, you'll get the remainder of that month free and the following month free too. That promo code is CREATIVE, which you can use on libsyn.com. Merry Christmas.